So my main argument in this paper is just here. Chaucer's The Man of Lost Tale provides an important perspective to bring the issue of mediation and mediality into light, and urges us to consider what constitutes the medial conditions of Constance's travel, and how mediating Constance's story is closely tied to the imagination of England's place in the meeting of East and West. So I begin by reading the last paragraph of the first page. Before Chaucer's composition of The Man of Lost Tale, 14th century England already saw the production of Constance's story by Nicholas Crevett and John Gower. It is curious to see how the Man of Law gestures to avoid repeating the narratives authored by Chaucer, only to retell a story produced by other authors, which he claims to have heard from a merchant. In accrediting his tale to an unnamed merchant, while distancing himself from Chaucer's mediation, the Man of Law distances himself from the precursor text. Please keep the lights on. Actually, because this is only just a aid. Thank you. So his question, why should Italian sing a main tone? While recalling the story's textual transmission in different sources and media, is rather one that comments on the mediated condition or mediality of the Constance story, as well as the self-reflexivity of storytelling and writing. And a notorious disjunction between the lawyer's declared intention to tell a prose tale and the product of poem in rhyme royal undergirds the very form of his tale that stages its own mediality. But it's tracing the source of a written tale, which Crevett and Gower already retold, to a merchant, a way to negotiate the very mediality of the tale in order to allay the anxiety of the latent mediation. Why is such a prominent role conferred on the merchant in Chaucer's tale? To answer these questions, we may turn to Walter Benjamin's celebrated essay on the artful medium of storytelling against the backdrop of emergent modernity that saw the transition from story to novel, a shift from storytelling understood as a vehicle of wisdom, rooted in an oral and in a medieval tradition, to modern forms of communication. The rise of the novel, which has its roots in the solitary individual and growing dependence on the book, witnesses different practices of materiality and mediality from those of oral transmission, which takes place through living immediacy and the ability to exchange experiences from mouth to mouth. Benjamin's reflection on the impact of the changing modern communication has much to bear on the parallel development in Chaucer's time. As Mary Carruthers puts it, far more frequently than a book or a token, the favored means of cultural translation, especially in the early Middle Ages, was apt to be a living, breathing, thinking, and speaking person. In the late Middle Ages, however, the dominance of oral transmission was on the wane. Though often carried out communally in the 14th century, reading was increasingly a private activity that tends to isolate its recipients. And I skipped the one whole paragraph. If the materiality of medial representation forms the basis for making of media that defines their mediality, or the typical set of characteristics or configurations constituting particular media, the narratives grounded in both oral and written cultures invite us to ponder its merging of media and mixed mediality. For a while emphasizing the role of voice, the significance of oath or prayer to Christ for blessing on the marriage deal, Chaucer's tale is replete with textual references that draw support from the authority of books. Chaucer's characteristic incorporation of oral features into written narrative results in a storytelling style that calls attention to the mediality of storytelling vis-a-vis the authority of textual culture. The difference is especially notable if we consider the case of Confessio Amantis, where Gower, keen to engage with manuscript culture, highlights the manuscript page as arena where Latin text verses, English text, and Latin commentaries are brought to confrontation and negotiation, with the Latin glossing apparatus investing the vernacular with an air of authority. As it will become clear, Chaucer's Constance story is presented in the embodied voice of the Menelaus rhizomatic storytelling that invokes the vital energy of an oral culture in dialogue with the written texts of other authors. As Benjamin would have it, this is the involved author carrying the empowered and empowering voice of storyteller. More importantly, it unfolds a multiple narratorial space for interactive and transmedia storytelling that occasions different medial conditions of possibility. In the following discussion, I will first examine particular in-between moments or junctures of mediality that manifest logics of mediation, in which different forms and practices of mediation are particularly visible and effects of mediating become significant. In the Menelaus remediation of the merchant's tale, the merchant's mediality provides the material for the new mediator engaged in an ongoing process of mediation. This medial flow underpins a narrative punctuated with cultural mobility in a vast network of cultural spaces defined by itineraries, points of contact, and exchange as the beginning of the narrative makes clear. Because of the little time, I will skip the block quote, and so that's why I have the slide here for your reference. Where Scour's tale gives prominence to Rome and Constance from the beginning. Constance's story features Syria and the productive role of its merchants whose mobility and connectivity have helped spread prosperity through their trade routes. The far-reaching Muslim trade network that extended from the Mediterranean to cover most of Europe, Asia, and Africa. This network converges with the information network of the Sultan, who is keen to learn diverse tidings from all over the world from the merchants, whose far and wide-ranging travels make them great transmitters and communicators of information. It is in this network centering around the trustworthy Syrian merchants that Constance appears as the most noteworthy item for mention. The accentuation of the Syrian merchants brings us to the controversy surrounding Constance's agency, as she may be regarded as a merchandise in the mercantile context. In contrast to Trevet's and Gowa's versions, where Constance first appears as an active agent who converts the heathen merchants with her persuasive language, Chaucer's Constance, I quote, is first introduced not in person but as narrative, end quote. The Menelaus elaborates the ways in which Constance is mediated in discourse and imagination. Here, in this quote, report of Constance's renown finds its destination in the Syrian merchants, the powerful providers of information who bring Rome into their trading networks, a transmission process with which the Menelaus now actively engages. At the outset of Chaucer's narrative, Constance is more an image than a character, and we first know about Constance through the common voice of every man. This circulation of information by word of mouth in the trading context brings Constance to the attention of the merchants, who upon their return replay her report to the Sultan. As if single mediation of voice speech is not enough, before their departure, the merchants have seen Constance in person, thus lending visual and corporeal dimension to their mediation of Constance. With the emphasis on Constance's beauty and physicality, Constance becomes embodied in the merchant's mediation. In this light, the Roman princess the Sultan hears about is mediated through the multimodal representation of fame, discourse, imagination, visuality, and embodiment. The report of Constance exerts such great impact on the Sultan that he mounts his decision with total surrender. Constance's role is therefore not only mediated, but also mediating, bringing about the Sultan's total surrender. The multimodal underpinnings of mediality featuring word of mouth find more complicated ramifications as Constance arrives in Northumbria, where her mediating role takes on a new dimension. How Constance's first speech communication takes place in this strange country epitomizes the complex mediality of embodied voice in communication. The Latin language in use here, corrupt as it is, somehow serves the purpose. The apparent hindrance of the imperfect medium, in this case, is very likely to be complemented by body language supporting media, such as facial expressions, gestures, and tone of voice. Graced with the power of speaking voice, Constance subsequently conversed Herneguil and her husband, the constable, under difficult circumstances, but speech, particular lies, can certainly serve malicious purposes. This is how Constance falls victim to the false accusation of the jealous knight. What happens at Constance's trial powerfully articulates the combined effects of the appeal of different medium. In a fashion supposedly following the practice of the former Christian community, King Allah makes the knight swear on a written gospel book. So it is rather illuminating for the Northumbrian court to keep a written book for use of juridical occasions. The Manor Law has informed us that the Saxons had ruthlessly driven the Christian people of Old Britain to Wales, turning Northumbria into a pagan land. Obviously, the Saxons do not know the British language, nor can they make sense of the book's content. But the written book is a remarkable example of Marshall McLuhan's famous dictum that the medium is the message. For here, language or content does not matter. It is rather the material written form, the very bookish mediality of the sanctified object that makes the whole point. So that Professor King's comment that the real manuscript is somehow different from the digitalized version. I agree, yeah. Say, on top of the embodied mediation of the written book, the scene culminates with God's theatrical intervention in response to the false testimony of the evil knight. In a climactic fulfillment of divine justice, the voice from heaven proclaims Constance's innocence in the authority of God's word of mouth, whose astounding power takes hold on the people present, a miracle in telling an expected turn of events. As the narrator shows in this quote, this one. As the narrator shows, besides the written book, the divine speech and the miracle, it is by Constance's mediation that the conversion is possible. In this light, the Roman princes, being passively mediated and victimized by the disconcerting history of Rome and Syria, has become the pivotal mediating force in directing the history of England. In an intriguing complement to the official Augustine mission to England, the narrative appears to present Constance as the mother of institutional Christianity in Anglo-Saxon Northumbria. In contrast to this joint impact of the amazing mediation, both divine and human, the fallibility of communication and the problems of mediality come into full view in the errand of the messenger and the counterfeiting of letters. And let's skip to the next paragraph. In this episode, the Man of Law's elaborate depiction highlights the mediality of the transmission of messages and the ways in which the corruption and distortion of media bring about alterations to the transmitted content. The censure of the messenger focuses on the unreliability of his function as transmitter of media. How the carrier of letters, the major medium in question here, is vulnerable to fraud and displacement reveals an unsettling process of communication where the defective media may exert unexpected effects on transmitted contents. The Menelau's condemnation of the king's mother, on the other hand, stresses the expressive limitation of language and the act of writing. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't include the quote here. Donegal is so un-English that her evilness can find no expression in the English language. Only the devil is up to the task of overcoming the incommensurability of medium and content. So, in the quotes we cited above, the Menelau's direct address to the character being narrated enacts the features of verbal storytelling whose mediality creates a paradoxical sense of immediacy, while intruding into the world of his own narrative with self-indulgent words or metaphorical flourishes that tend to distract from, even as it engages the flow of the narrative. Digressions of this sort, in momentarily turning away from the subject being told, but not really stepping out of the story, draw attention to the very act of storytelling and the mediation of the storyteller. Connective tissues deployed to make links provide not only different perspectives, interpolations of opinions or comments offering insight into events and characters, but also notable scenes in the narrative that are self-referential of its materiality and mediality. In a comment that epitomizes this self-referentiality, the Menelau tells the audience how and what he is going to say about Constance's marriage to King Allah. As the man of law puts it, when taken away its chaff, the fruit of the tale is they eat and drink and dance and sing and play. So the matter-of-factness of the last line ironically confirms the necessity of rhetorical and narratorial chaff in storytelling. How the story is told, the mediality of storytelling, matters as much as the story, or indeed they are inseparable. The ways in which the Menelau presents the Constance story do have significant implications in making sense of the Rome, Syria, Northumbria matrix. The Menelau's specification of the place in Syria at the very beginning of his tale ascribes unusual significance to the east and the dominant role of Syrian merchants in the tale. The notable emphasis on Syria and the merchants demands special attention since the lawyer omits many historical and circumstantial details of his sources. So I skipped the part explaining the strategic position of Syria. Okay, so the inception of the story thus highlights the Eastern influence over the Roman domicile, an imperial home susceptible to and even shaped by complex relations of power with the East. An inspection of key historical personages in the tale of Constance will further confirm the ambivalence and hybrid nature of Rome. In the next paragraph, the way in which the Menelau tells the story certainly formed part of the message he sets out to convey, just as the tale's opening places a high premium on Syrian merchants whose word of mouth entails the whole romance. At the heart of the English section of the tale, the Menelau elaborates on the rudderless boat that exposes Constance to the dominant mediation of the sea, which proves a pivotal stage, both as principal setting and as key nodes of transition for subsequent action and interaction. But whereas he fires a series of agitated diatribe upon Constance's expulsion from Syria, here he meditates on the amazing grace of God in safeguarding the helpless Constance. So the rudderless boat as a bounded medium, subject to boundless ungovernability of the sea, with limitless uncertainty, leaves Constance to natural and supernatural course of action beyond human arbitration, but ultimately subsumed by divine mediation. The rudderless boat carries Constance together with a heavy load of cultural associations against the backdrop of the formidable perils of the sea. In V.F. Coe's allegorical reading based on ample medieval examples, the predominant narrative image of Constance in the rudderless boat afloat on the sea imparts meanings at different levels. But while Coe regards Rome as the center of the poem's gravity, its geography, and its moral and spiritual meaning, I argue that the rudderless boat in our text conveys something quite different, if not opposite. As Jacques Le Goff observes, the sea and wilderness occupied a similar place in the Western European medieval imagination. The trouble equating the sea with the desert can best be seen in the life of Saint Columba. Afloat on the sea, yet finally arrived in England, Constance thus assumes sanctity equivalent to that of the celebrated insular saint. Above all, the men of law, showing great concern about England's unique place, accord special spiritual significance to Constance's eventual landing on the English shore. So these lines here make it clear that it is God who brings Constance to England. While Constance is sent to Syria by the mediation between Rome and Syria, God's providence steers Constance's rudderless boat to the shore of Northumbria, and thus makes the English less Rome's holy subject than God's chosen people. This election of England as the destination of Constance's exilic travel comes along with the reinvention or remediation of Constance's identity. After Constance becomes lost in a rough translation from the eastern Mediterranean to the far west in Northumbria, she severs her connections with Rome by concealing her identity. Okay, I'm not quite sure how much time I have. So a new life thereby begins in a new land that inaugurates new possibilities. Constance becomes the vital medium and catalyst for the revival of the latent Christian community in Northumbria, yet she is also an opaque medium subject to violent imposition of meanings, as can be seen in the fate letter of Donegal. Making the issue of Constance's obscure background and unknown identity, Donegal here associate Constance with elvish charm. Witchcraft and reproduction of monstrous offspring, thus powerfully invoking Constance's image as both the other and mother of Northumbria. Although the malicious plotting of the forged letters leads Constance to another forced exile, the tragic event turns out to trigger a series of blessings in disguise. This time, Constance is not alone, but travels with her son Maurice. The life-giving image of mother with child bespeaks her new mediating role, while Maurice will prove to be a vital medium for Constance as well. Maurice's mediation is indispensable in bringing about Constance's double family reunion, first with her husband and then with her father. The man of law specifically comments on the medial role of Maurice and makes it clear that Constance sends her son to the feast of the senator and King Allah for that particular purpose. Constance asks her son to look in the king's face so as to entail the reciprocal look by the king. The effect of this visual contact on Allah is immediate, because the Maurice reminds Allah of his wife. As the unfolding of the plot shows, Constance's reunion with Allah through Maurice is a necessary condition for her reunion with her father, who is similarly reminded of his daughter at the sight of Maurice. This suggests that only when her English identity is recognized will she make her homecoming known to her father. The mediation of Maurice foregrounds Constance's new mediating role. She's not so much a Roman prince's daughter as an English queen mother. And now I come to my last paragraph, the conclusion. Straddling the vibrant voice of oral delivery and the bookish materiality of medieval manuscript culture, the Men of Law's Tale captures the mediality of Middle English literature at a critical point of inflection, a liminal moment signaling a larger concern with the evolving culture of books and paper materiality from the long tradition of oral transmission. It sets out to negotiate semiotic fixity versus flexibility of storytelling to discover the story of Constance anew by way of a mixed mediality. On the other hand, as vessel carrying Constance to Northumbria and then back to Rome, the Rudderless boat dramatizes Providence's immediate transmission and undergirds the crucial English mediation that transpires to supersede Roman dominance and Roman domicile. In the face of contemporary pressures and frustrations, the profound concern about the place of England in the world of medial conditions and her mediating role as embodied in Constance runs through different versions of the Constance story from 14th century England and finds its culmination in Chaucer's retelling. In mediating Constance's story through the immediacy of the East and the motherland of England, Chaucer's tale occasions a remedial transmutation of the logic of liminality and centrality that envisions a variegated relationship of England and Rome, East and West. Thank you.